All right. All right. All right. All right. Events and experiential marketing students. This is not how we anticipated this event to take place. But when you are working in the world as my good friend, as we like to refer to him as Jimmy, that's what Giles, our good friend Giles, called him. But uh, he worked at an ad agency where he did a lot of this stuff, as well as his experience is wide on marketing supporting companies. So I want to introduce him to you, my friend, and I'm so glad you're doing this for us. And he's going to talk a little about experiential marketing, and then we'll have a conversation about it. So let's turn it over to you, my brother. Take it away.
Thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here again. Quick intro. As Tom said, I've worked across many big clients over the years in advertising in different functions. The last three and a half, I was working at a company called 160 over 90, which does a lot of experiential work, um, and worked with clients like Marriott and a few others. So I did spend quite a bit of time working with experiential campaigns and activations. So I thought we'd start with why experiential marketing, and then go from there. So I think the main thing to think about with any type of experiential activation is that it's one of the many channels we have at our disposal, right? For brands to communicate to consumers, and it's the same reason why we would use cinema or TV or social. It's to create meaningful connections with consumers. At the end of the day, there's many different objectives and things you're trying to achieve with your marketing, and it all boils down to connecting with consumers in some shape or form, right? And experiential can be a great way of doing that, in specific ways that other channels can do, and vice versa, right? So I'll talk a bit more about what I think are the best ways to use experiential, the best things you can achieve with experiential, and some of the challenges and things to think about. And I'll give you some examples of great campaigns. Some of those I've worked on, others I've admired from afar. Um, Sounds good?
Sounds perfect, my brother. Sounds just what the doctor ordered.
All right. Um, So I think that the first place to start is what can experiential and event marketing achieve, right? I'm taking more of a consumer angle here. Events and experiential activations play a critical role in B2B marketing as well. The company I'm at now, Smartly, does a lot of events for customers and clients. I'm not going to talk about that for today. Focus more on the consumer side. But experiential is particularly good at a few things, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but some of those things are uh, unique to experiential. The main one being in-person engagement. There's nothing like interacting with a brand in person. You're present, you're focused, you're entertained, hopefully, and it is the most powerful thing that experiential can do, right? It's tied to the second one, which is product trial, but it's putting the brand in people's hands, and it's putting people into the brand in ways that no other channel can do, right? And I'll explain why that also makes it harder in some ways, because if you don't do it right, it's kind of a waste. So in-person engagement is obviously the most powerful thing. Product trial is pretty obvious, but also I would say brand experience. You may work for a brand that doesn't have a product, that has a service, or you may work for a brand like an airline. You can't put people in an airplane necessarily at a festival like Coachella, but you can build things that make them experience the brand in ways that are only second to the real thing, flying to Dubai on an Emirates airplane, for example.
Mhm.
The third piece is brand awareness, and I think that I use this to imply it can drive all sorts of brand metrics. Um, it seems counterintuitive that doing something in a physical world that only a limited number of people can experience would drive brand awareness, but I'll talk to why later. It is critical to me, at least, to think about experiential not just being something that a few hundred or thousands of people experience in that moment, in that place, because you're limiting yourself if you do that. So it can definitely drive brand awareness at scale. I'll talk about that. And it can boost brand loyalty. A lot of the work I did with Marriott, there's a T-Mobile example here. American Express is very good at this. Experiential can be a great way to reward and give your loyal customers a better experience. The way I think about experiential, to me, there's different ways of doing it. I'm talking about experiential primarily in the context of cultural moments, festivals, sporting events. Experiential can also be a pop up in a mall or a pop up in Soho here in New York, but I think that's a slightly different thing. That's more of a retail play, right? When I say experiential, I really personally, from my experience, think about these big cultural moments. The T-Mobile image here is from the F1 race in Vegas. Um, the power to provide to existing customers something really special at an event that they've dreamt of going to for years, have paid good money to go to, is super powerful. And that's what we did with Marriott Bonvoy. I'll talk about the Kelsey thing later, but in many ways we did it across Formula One or other NFL events where uh, giving something special to Marriott Bonvoy members made their experience so much better, and that translates into more loyalty for them. But also, on the flip side, you can make non-members or non-loyal customers see the value of becoming a member, right? So, experiential really can run across the entire funnel, um, but you have to be very smart about how you activate to achieve those things. Because again, you might you look at that Club Magenta build at the Vegas Grand Prix. That thing isn't cheap to build. That retail space isn't cheap to rent from the F1. So that sort of leads me to the next slide, if I can get it, of key considerations to keep in mind with experiential, and then Tom, if you will have questions, we can pause after this slide. But it's incredibly important to know the strengths of experiential, which I just went through, and there's more, of course, but also know that it has some characteristics. They're not limitations; they're just characteristics of the medium, of the channel, if you will. It's expensive. You're building things. You are paying to rent a 40 by 40 footprint at Coachella. You are partnering with the NFL to be able to build something cool in their NFL fan zone at Super Bowl. So there's a lot of setup costs to begin with, right? Something that you don't necessarily you have with any other channel. Of course, you got to pay to run. You got to pay $8 million to run an ad in the Super Bowl. So that's expensive too. But if you're running on Facebook, if you're running cinema ads, the cost to run those ads and to produce those ads is different, right? The ratio to production to how many people will engage with it is quite different. And that's one of the biggest learnings for me when working with experiential has been that a lot of senior executives in companies, rightly so, by the way, question the ROI of it, right? Because it's so expensive and it only touches in person a limited amount of people. Even the most successful experiential activations can only really hit hundreds of thousands of people at a given time, right? Even if you do something like we did at NFL Draft for Courtyard, Draft is one of those rare moments when hundreds of thousands of people descend into one place, right? Whether it's Detroit, Green Bay, um, and you can engage with most of them if you're good and if you're lucky. It doesn't compare to running an ad on even on daytime TV that hits millions of people, right? So the cost to set it up and to run it, as well as the limitations on how people can interact with it in person, makes it a pretty difficult business case sometimes. So I want your students to remember that and think about that as they think about experiential. You also tend to be in very competitive environments. I'll use Coachella, and I'm using the big events as an example, Tom, and it's not the only way you do experiential by any means in culture, but it is an important lens. If you want to be part of Coachella, you got to buy the sponsorship of your category. So let's say you're a beer brand, you have to be the official beer of Coachella. So you work with AG who manages Coachella. You then have to pay for, within that, you get the rights to that 40 by 40. But you're competing with other brands in other categories that are doing really cool things. And let's be honest, if you go to Coachella, the last thing on your mind is, what brands do I want to interact with at Coachella? You want to see the acts, you want to have fun, you want to party with your friends. So the competition is not from other only from other brands. It's from the very fact that you are the last thing on people's minds at these events, right? No matter how cool of a brand you are, no matter how good of a thing you build, and we'll get to that, um, advertising is interrupting, right? In the best of cases, on TV, in social, in cinema. It's kind of the same in experiential, in that you're not interrupting unless you're physically stopping someone to get to the place they're going to, but you're kind of background noise most of the time. Um, and the last piece is very important, right? I've heard this critique many times from clients. We're spending $1 million to do this amazing thing at this festival, and it's a 2 day thing. Versus I could spend $2 million on Facebook and run a campaign for 3 months. What's the math here? The math isn't mathing. So these are all flip sides of the strengths of experiential, right? Because at the same time, if you built a thing and it lasted for a full year in the same place for a year, people would probably stop noticing. So there are reasons why experiential is, you're capitalizing on a lot of people, or the right people. Doesn't have to be a lot of people. It can be a smaller event, but you're hitting the right audience in a specific time when they're really engaged in being there, right? But the flip side is it's expensive. You reach less people than other channels, and you do it for limited time. So I think these are the yin and yang of experiential in a nutshell, as I've seen it. I love it. I think it's a great way to advertise and to engage consumers, but it comes with a different set of challenges. And I'll say this, and then we can maybe have a little back and forth if you want. I have worked with people who produce TV ads or people who produce social ads. It's a tough job. Nothing is as tough from what I've seen as experiential. The folks I've worked with in experiential at 160 and other production companies, man, it you have to be born for it and love it because it's crazy. You get in at 2 a.m., you build the thing, you stay there all day, you run the thing, you make sure consumers are happy, having a great time, and then you got to stay until 5 in the morning to tear it all down and move it to the next thing. It's wild. It's exciting. It's advertising and marketing like nothing else. But it truly comes with its own set of challenges and advantages. I don't know if you have any questions or if you want me to keep going.
No, no, I mean, I think, again, it's a guy that ran marketing departments and, like trade shows. I always had things going on at trade shows. I wanted to have stuff that got buzz, that people talked about, that appeared and made it the trade press. So we always tried to do that. I did, a game show, and so without a doubt, I'm a big believer in this. Because again, a Facebook ad campaign, boring. I mean, here, like at a trade show, there'd be press about it, and so, afterwards, the things that we did still lived on. Similar to the things you just described, and I think about, for example, the large customers of someone like Marriott, who I'm sure they got involved. So, they're taking care of their good, they're good customers,
Yeah,
which makes them happy. And so, I'm a big believer in it, and I'm loving what you're saying so far, because we're in agreement.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, actually, good point. So another example at Super Bowl, we for years now, we helped Marriott and Visa, another client, put together a big event for their Marriott Bonvoy card holders. And it's the Marriott, used to be the Courtyard House, sponsored by Visa. Now it's the Marriott Bonvoy House, with Visa. And yeah, it's a great way to entertain either big clients like developers or cardholders who are your loyal cardholder members, and give them something special at Super Bowl that nobody else can access. So 100%. And I think the other point, which I'll get into a bit later, is that at the end of the day, experiential, in my mind, should never be just its own thing. it should be part of a larger campaign, right? So that's how it lives on before the event,
Mhm.
during and after the event, and that's how you amplify the investment in building something really cool in the real world.
And it should chill out the maths that don't they say it's mathing because it goes on. It
Yes,
really is a part of everything we're doing to promote our brand. Uh,
correct.
just like the ads we run and the salespeople that are making calls, it's all a part of that. And to me, it adds juice, it gets excitement, and that's something that no Facebook ad will ever do.
But you need Facebook ads to help you do that, right?
Yep,
So
yep, yep. It's a
it's
part of it.
it's all connected, and I think that is probably the most critical takeaway, if there is one, that whatever you do when you think about events, marketing, and experiential, think about how it fits in your overarching marketing strategy, right? And think about how it helps, to your point, make it more exciting and more buzzy, because that can be done with experiential more than other channels, because you can create kind of sort of crazy things people will post about. Um, I think it's tempting to do one-offs. I think one-offs are fine if you're launching a new movie, then it's part of that campaign for that movie, and that's it. That's fine. But for brands who are sort of trying to break into culture, especially, that was the angle we had with my clients in my previous role. I think it's also about building your presence in that cultural space, be it music or sport or whatever, right? So experiential then starts becoming a tool that's part of a larger toolbox. Um, and so I think I wanted to leave you guys with a few pillars or tenets or learnings that I think are extremely important for successful experiential marketing. The first one being delivering true value to consumers and to people that you meet in that place at that time, right? Again, this is from a cultural marketing angle, but I think it applies even to a pop up on the street anywhere, right? Because if you're asking someone to interact with you, you have to give them something of value. It's the same thing with any form of advertising, right? You either entertain someone, you educate them, you make them cry, you make them feel something. That's good advertising. Even more so with experiential. I'm using Amex here as an example. They are, to me, one of the best examples of experiential marketing in the world because of three reasons. One, they understand the importance of a value exchange. They typically show up at festivals, sporting events, and they're not the only ones who do it, but I think they do it probably better than anybody else at scale. They show up and they give you the same benefits you get as a card holder anywhere else. This sort of peace of mind, this you're taken care of. And so simply put, most of the times it's a very cool build, a cool lounge type thing. Coachella, again, as an example, you get air conditioning in there, which you don't get elsewhere in the desert. Coachella, it's in the desert, it's hot, it's muddy, it's sticky, it's sandy, whatever you want. You get respite from that, and you can recharge. They have phone chargers. It's all basic stuff, but the way they package it is true to their brand. It's true to their actual product and service that it makes your life easier, right? And so they do that across a number of festivals and sporting events, and it adds value. And it's not trying to compete with the event itself. It's not trying to be something it's not. And consumers love it because card holders know now it's a behavior that they've learned. If they go to an event, there'll be an Amex lounge that is, and they're all different. They're all built to fit the event where they can recharge and grab some food and grab some water and then go back out to party again. So it's adding value in ways that you might say, well, that's not particularly exciting. But if you're a festival goer, the insight of I'm hot, I'm thirsty, the lines for drinks are super long. Wait a minute, I'm an Amex card holder. I can go there and get some water, maybe even drinks, depending on the festival, get some air conditioning. That's powerful. Advertising and marketing don't have to be complicated. It's giving something valuable to the person in that moment. And this is very valuable to a festival goer in the moment. So to me, I've seen many examples of brands just F1 is popular. Let's do something at F1. And they show up and it's just kind of like clunky and there's no reason for them to be there and they're not giving fans anything worth their time. And it's not doesn't have to be a transactional thing, but they're not giving them any value. And so it's kind of like it's like putting your logo in arenas. It's helpful. It drives impressions, but it's not worth the money. You're not engaging people. You're just badging things. So, to me, that's the number one thing when you think about doing events. Is I think it's true to any advertising. Like I said, what is the value exchange? What are you doing? Because, like I said, when you're running ads, you're interrupting people's loved show or scrolling or whatever. Give them something that makes them want to engage. Even more so here. If you're not giving value, you're just background.
Have you been to Coachella? Because as I understand from, I've only read about it, that it's so hot and so miserable that I got to believe this is like a oasis
Yeah,
for
it is.
concert
It
goers. Like,
happens.
oh my God, cold water, ace air conditioning, run, run, run. I got to believe this is well loved by people that attend.
It is. It is. I haven't been myself. I've been to other festivals, but we did some work at Coachella with other brands, and I've heard that like the Amex Lounge is a gold standard because again, yeah, it tailors and it's tailored to a need of those who are there. Um, so to me, whatever that angle is, whether it's again using Coachella because we did some work there, it's a nightmare to leave once the day is over to get back to your hotel. So giving people free Ubers, giving people that think about the consumer experience at that event and find ways to make it better. That's the simplest way I can put it. Um, Better can mean different things. It could be easier, it could be more fun, um, could be enhancing it in some way. So that's my first learning and my first piece of advice. The second one is what we talked about earlier. It's reach as many of them as possible, right? I think, as we said, experiential is limited to a place and a time. It's expensive to build. It doesn't have to always be very expensive, but if you want to do a good job, it tends to be expensive to build these things. And you can be smart about how you do it, but nonetheless, it is one of the constraints. And more importantly, the constraint is that you can only reach so many people in person at an event. Again, draft, hundreds of thousands of people descend on Detroit at draft, it is still not the size of a TV campaign. It just can't be. So, how do you think about experiential in terms of both those who will experience it in person and those who will hear about it and consume content about it everywhere else? To me, as we briefly touched upon earlier, that's the key to making experiential really work for you and your brand and thinking about it as one component of a larger campaign. And even if you do a one off, always think about the PR and social amplification, word of mouth, whatever word you want to use, of what you're doing. Even if you're doing just a one off to do a launch of a product and the campaign is not a year long, the experiential elements still should still drive a ton of conversation um, from people that will never see it in person. Otherwise, yes, you're spending a bunch of money to entertain a few hundred thousand, tens of thousands of people, but it's not worth it. The amount of work that goes into this kind of stuff is it's not worth it. So um, we always looked at the, whenever thinking about experiential, we always looked at the PR angle. How do you get media to cover it? And even more so in the last 10, 15 years with social exploding. How do you get people to post about it, whether it's you create content that's shot there, whether you tease it before it happens, whether you make build something so interesting that people will post about it themselves who were there. And the combination of all those things will make it go broad further than it would in just a physical space. So
Do you
100%.
engage like content creators that are in those spaces in advance? So that's part of your plan on amplification.
100%. So the days of something going viral just because it's good enough, it never was really a real thing. It happened here and there, but that's like lightning in a bottle, right? It you when you are building experiential campaigns, you're building a campaign, and you have to think about all the channels within the experiential campaign and all the tactics that will make it more likely to go much further than just at the event. So yeah, it's using the paid, owned, and earned model, right? It's thinking about how do you promote it before it happens, whether it's promoted so people show up, or whether it's promoted because so people know about it, probably both. How do you use your own channels like your CRM, your emails to get people who are, in Merit's case, members? And every brand nowadays has a database, right? So Amex, I'm sure, tells all their customers that are likely to go to Coachella about their lounge weeks in advance. And then, yeah, how do you make sure that you send influencers over, creators? How do you shoot content at the event that you can then repurpose for advertising, or just to sort of put in your organic channel? So, 100%. If you're just doing the build and hoping that people show up and people talk about it, good luck. That's going to be very, very difficult to happen. So yeah, it's a campaign in its own right. Right? It needs other channels to help it be successful. So I always think of the experiential build as the sort of the cool thing that then you make famous, right? Um, I mean, there are times when you can do something that only a few hundred people see and experience, but then it's so cool that it hits millions of people on social and through content. The reach, the physical reach of your experiential activation is important depending on what you're trying to do, right? If, to your point, if you're trying to entertain customers, maybe it's an event that 50 people attend. If you're trying to get people to sign up to stuff, then you got to hit a few more than 50, because otherwise the ROI is not worth it. But you don't have to necessarily engage 500,000 people in person for experiential to be successful. It can engage 50 people and then be talked about by millions, right? So that scale is important. And so I used your Philly hero, Jason Kelce, here as an example, as
I see
public.
his dopelingers on the bottom over there.
Yeah, right, that's right. So full disclosure, I don't work at that agency anymore, but I worked on the build up to the campaign. And uh, basically, as you know, we've been doing some great work with Marriott and Courtyard over the years, and as part of their NFL sponsorship. And one of the crown jewels, if you will, was the Super Bowl sleepover, which I think I talked about in my last time we met.
Which, by the way, I have assigned to my branding students. On it's called How to Work with an Agency, and I believe that's in this week's D2L. So I had such gold. I have such gold there that I've assigned them to look at certain sessions, and yours was one of them.
I
Because
appreciate it.
as you go through the class, I want you to leave with an understanding that these men and women have, graciously shared their time to pass on advice and learnings that they could take with them. So it gives the kids a step up when they start out there. So yes, they have watched your show. I mean,
I
your
love it.
your
I love it.
session is on there.
That's awesome. Your students are very lucky to have all these, myself excluded, all these amazing.
Oh, please, you're included. So I agree. They are, I mean, without a doubt, they should take, I beg them to take advantage of all the gold that's on that YouTube channel.
And so yeah, so the Courtyard Super Bowl Sleepover is an awesome activation we've done for a few years that Courtyard's been hosting. And the challenge is always, how do you make it fresh? How do you make it exciting? How do you, I mean, in of itself, the idea I think is awesome. When you tell someone about it, everyone's like, well, that's cool. Sleep in the stadium the night before the Super Bowl, that's amazing. But you have to compete, right? You're an NFL partner. You're competing against Bud Light. You're competing against Visa. You're competing against a ton of NFL sponsors with sometimes bigger budgets, and who do really cool things too. So you always have to find an angle when it comes to your experiential activations that will make them stand out. And I'll bring that back later. But so this work with Jason Kelsey started not for Super Bowl. It started with the idea of, how do we make the NFL partnership bigger? How do we make NFL fans really want to engage with Marriott, Bonvoy, and Courtyard as the official hotel of the NFL? So, with the clients and other partner agencies, we built this campaign around the fan ambassador. Jason Kelsey retired, first season not playing. How does someone like him, who is an amazing character, by the way, he's super hot right now, and how do we use someone like him to basically help fans have the best NFL experiences ever? And so the whole campaign, you guys can look it up, had all these different experiences that were designed to bring fans closer to the game, and reinforce the importance of travel and making NFL memories so much more special, right? And so for Super Bowl, the PR team came up with this concept of, Jason Kelsey is super popular right now. Everyone loves him. He's working with all sorts of brands. He's everywhere, and play on that to say, how do we uh, play on that and show make almost like a find the real Jason Kelsey type competition in New Orleans, to then award the winners the Super Bowl sleepover, right? Because that tells a story around Jason Kelsey and this campaign that culminates the Super Bowl with him. It's relevant because the lookalike thing is kind of trending lately. There's been a few other ones popping up, Timothée Chalamet and here in New York, and more. And so it combined cultural trends, the culmination of this amazing campaign with Jason Kelsey as the fan ambassador. A bunch of content was released throughout the season, and experiences for that, and made it fun, and people talked about it, right? The press covered it, and it was a culmination of this whole campaign, and it made the experiential activation of the Super Bowl sleepover and the other things the team had happening in New Orleans so much more famous, so much more interesting for everyone to cover and talk about and watch the content. So,
And it
so
helped that the Eagles were there.
it's it was. I mean, sometimes in marketing you hit these perfect moments.
That was
And
a perfect moment, man. Eagles
well,
fans, they outnumbered the Chiefs fans like 7-3.
and they won the Super Bowl. So like, I can't think. I'm so happy for my former colleagues and clients of how it all worked out, because yeah, it was truly a dream come true, right? And I have to say, when you work with talent, that's a big part of experiential as well, as we talked about. Having talent show up to these things really helps, right? It's obvious. Like if you throw a party at Super Bowl and you have Jason Kelsey show up, or a big musical act, people are going to show up. It's an important, but working with talent is a whole other thing that I'm not going to get into too much, but it's another massive lever for brands, and it's a tricky one. Jason Kelsey is an outstanding individual. He deserves all the praise he gets. He was amazing to work with, and people love him for all the right reasons. And so I think we were lucky to work with him. The clients were very smart to hire him for this role. Um, and yeah, hit lightning in a bottle, right? With the Eagles being there and winning the whole thing. So, but yeah, it reminds me, good point. Like, talent is a very important part of experience. It can be an important part of
I'm
experience.
sure it could be good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, I have some stories which I won't share here, but in front of a peer, for sure. But I think,
I've heard some of those stories. My daughter works for A24. She does the post production, and some famous people she's got. Oh,
yep,
you're not so good to work with, but we'll
yep,
keep that on the side.
that's a good point. And Jason is he's a star. He's an outlier in many ways. A star in the sense he's famous, but he's also great to work with. Um,
He's also a marketing major, just so you know. In college, he was a marketing
I didn't
major.
know
So
that.
I think, yeah, at the University of
Okay,
Cincinnati, he studied marketing, and
that makes sense.
he got into branding for the football team back then. So he
Yeah.
he'd been thinking about this stuff for a long time.
Him and his brother are building an empire. They've built an empire, right? So,
Yep.
anyways, yeah, I think the point here is think about experiential is not just for those who will see it in real life. Otherwise, you're limiting yourself, and frankly, it's going to be a hard sell with your leadership to go spend money to build the thing, to rent the space, to staff the thing, to deal with all the nightmares and headaches that come with experiential, where you show up and the supplier hasn't delivered the screens for the thing, or the napkins don't have the right logo on them. There's so much that could go wrong with activations that you better be worth it. So that's the second thing for me that's really important to think about. The third thing is, I've mentioned a bit, but it's about focusing on something, and then standing out. When I say focus, I believe this to be important across all marketing and advertising. Sometimes brands will throw the kitchen sink at you. We do this and we do this and then we do this and then here's this. Consumers, people don't care. They have limited attention, even less so at a festival where you are just background noise. I either have a good reason to walk by your installation, your tent, your whatever, or I'm just going to keep having fun and ignore you. And so I think focus is a massive challenge for brands in general. We tend to overcomplicate messaging across all channels, and with experiential and with partnerships, which are tied and sort of they come together often with things like music or sports. We tend to think we can do everything. We can drive awareness. We can drive conversions. We can drive. You can, but should you? And so when you show up at an event, have a very singular focus on why you're there, which ties back to the Amex example, and focus your execution. Don't try to do 5,000 different things because, as I said before, experiential is in the real world. Things could go wrong very quickly. Talent doesn't show up. The build breaks down. It's you're at the mercy of weather. You're at the mercy of humans. It's so many more variables than launching a campaign live on social, which is hard in different ways. But you can always delay a campaign once the festival starts. If your thing isn't open, your thing isn't open. Um, and focus, I think, is tied to standing out. So I put an Airbnb example in here where it's a slightly different angle to experiential. They didn't show up at an event, but they had this great collaboration with culture. They did a Barbie house. This is a Polly Pocket example, which is very relevant to me because my 5-year-old loves Polly Pocket and wanted to go to this thing. They built a Polly Pocket house. You can see it in the image. You can actually sleep in that one. There was a cool additional thing where you slept in, which was themed to Polly Pocket. But uh, that's awesome. It's something that stands out and people talked about for weeks, right? And it ties back. It's focused on what Airbnb does best, hosting you in incredibly cool different ways. Of course, it's an exaggeration of their business. Normally, you stay in an apartment, but or a house. But to me, it ties back to knowing what your brand is about, what your product is about, focusing on that, and showing up that way.
As
And
well
that's
as it's married in a culture. It was a
yeah,
huge cultural event, as you
correct,
said. That's important.
correct, correct. And focus is hard. And I think sometimes, I said before, people brands throw up at events. They'll just throw a party, and then parties I forget. I mean, even if I go to a party and have a great time, but you're a car brand. Why would I remember you as a car brand? I just went to a good party. Fine. So focus on what you can deliver that makes sense for your brand and stand out. It's hard, man. There's only so many things you can do in the real world. So when you're brainstorming experiential activations, everything's been done before. I mean, the whole Super Bowl sleepover is such a great idea, but I'm not going to name names. But Google, there's other hotel brands that have started doing similar things in other stadiums and golf courses. Once you've done it, it's done, right? Staying at a thing in a custom room, so you can do that again. But you got to find. That's why the Jason Kelce thing came in. How do you make it different? How do you make it stand out? Because there's limitations of physics of what you can build, limitations of what you're allowed to do. There's rightly so very stringent rules of what you can and cannot build at these events. So getting creative with experiential is hard. It's
There's
exciting.
uh, there's constraints, it sounds
Oh
like,
yeah,
that you have to work within, that causes your creativity to be smart.
yeah, ton of constraints, and I think some of your other speakers have talked about this. I think I remember Nick saying this last year, whenever it was we last spoke. Constraints are actually good for creativity because when you give creatives a blank piece of paper, it's hard. Constraints can be helpful, but with experiential constraints are a different thing. It's constraints of how much what kind of materials you can spend money on, constraints and the weight limits of the place where you can build. So the wind, I mean, the numbers that we did an activation in Sao Paulo for the NFL game where we had a giant sort of what's it called, the end zone. People had to kick a football to the end zone and win tickets to the Super Bowl, but we had to build it in a way that was not going to fall over if wind was too strong. So you start learning all these different things. That means that to stand out, you can think of the coolest thing, but trust me, they will break it down because you can't do it. So focus on what's going to stand out and build something that will stand out. And then the almost done here. The second to last thing is do it consistently. This is hard and it's unfair for to expect this of all brands, but I think the value with experiential in culture, especially, and it takes money. It takes money and big resources, so not all brands can do it. But if you're a big brand, is commit to doing it consistently. T-Mobile did, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they have this Club Magenta. It's basically benefits for T-Mobile customers, and they brought it to life through festivals with different pop-ups at different music festivals, and they basically did it throughout the festival circuit, showing up at key festivals around the country, similar to Amex, and you build equity, right? So if I'm a T-Mobile customer, I know about this program because I get, I don't know, free movie tickets, other perks as part of Club Magenta. But then I know that when I show up to a festival that T-Mobile's at, I will get special access. You'll get intimate concerts with acts that nobody else will see. There's a glam station there to glam you up for the festival. So they do all these cool things and they do it over and over again. Again, that's expensive. It's really expensive, and it takes a lot of work to sort of turn it into something you can scale and travel to different places. And it goes back to my admiration for those who work in experiential production. They're heroes, frankly, because it's hard work. But again, part of a campaign, T-Mobile is all about entertainment and culture, and this is a way for them to build equity and put their money where their mouth is and show up at these festivals and really deliver value for festival goers. So it's not for everyone. It depends on what budgets you have, but you can do it in smart, inexpensive ways as well. Consistency in advertising and marketing in general is underrated as a critical thing to do. And so to me, it's like you want to start doing something in sports, commit to it for a couple of years, build, and have a roadmap. Right? No one. I'm not saying do the thing at a $5 million level from the get go, but build and build equity, learn through it, develop it, and people start recognizing that you're in that space and you'll become known for that. And I think there's a ton of value when it comes to experiential in doing things over and over again.
And I'm sure to T-Mobile, this is an important part of their marketing.
It is.
Certainly, the CEO that gets up and tries to build
Yeah.
a reputation. I mean, that's all a part of it. He's in those, in that color scheme that um, I think it's smart. Clearly, if you're a T-Mobile customer going to festivals, you're looking for this. I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
exactly. Exactly. 100%. And yeah, it ties back to their offers that you get through their app. So again, it's complex stuff, but it's part of a marketing ecosystem. And I think it can be an amazing part of it. But it takes consistency, right? Because again, I've seen brands show up to a festival once and it doesn't quite work, and so they give up. So because it's hard, it's really hard as we've learned throughout this session. And the last thing I'll say is prove it works. Like I said, you can get carried away and do this awesome party, awesome event, awesome activation, da, 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 da. But if you haven't thought about why you're doing it, who you're trying to target, all the basics that I'm sure you drill into your students from day one of your classes, the same thing applies here. And in many ways, it's harder to measure, right? Sure, it's pretty easy to count how many people walk by your thing or interact, but that number is never going to be spectacular because it's just the nature of physical events. So, how do you set up an experiential activation from the get go as part of your larger marketing efforts? How do you build the before the event, during the event, after the event, content, support, all that stuff? And how do you measure it all to show that the X number of millions of dollars that have went into this big thing drove 10 times the ROI? And I've seen brands really struggle with this because if you don't set it up the right way, then after the fact, you can't go back and say, "What did this do for us?" Well, 5,000 people sort of played the basketball game in our thing at the NBA or the Final Four. Okay, but what did that do for the brand? I don't know. So like it's imperative with any marketing effort that you think about why you're doing it to achieve what, but that measurement is part of your thinking from the beginning. And again, you might think that building a cool thing at a big event is going to be enough. But if you can't prove that it delivered, you're not getting that budget next year. And I think that that's something that the experiential marketing industry sometimes struggles with. I think because they're maybe not used to measuring things as well as social or other parts of the marketing ecosystem. So bringing that lens to the event is pretty important. I think it's what we do is fun and it's exciting, but it's got to drive results for the business, right? So um, I think that that is a critical piece to keep in mind from the beginning.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think of, my wife and I stay at Marriott Courtyards quite often, and we would check in, and there would be the football helmet. There would be pictures of rooms, the Jets room, you guys built they built rooms for the craziest fan, talking about, there was the contest. I entered that thing, seeing, seeing the Jason Kelce lookalikes walking the street. I forget where, I think he was on his Monday Night Football. He said, "How hard is it to get somebody to look like me? I mean, I'm a fat guy with a beard." And yet they found a bunch that looked a lot like him. And
Yep.
and so that was exciting. And then reading about that. And so I mean, I feel more affinity towards Marriott Courtyard because of these things, from experiencing it, from checking in and staying at their hotels to seeing this big event that they throw. So I'm a big believer in experiential marketing, but you gave us a great overview of things that you should be thinking about to make it effective. Because at the end of the day, it's going to cost some money, and is it going to pay off?
Yeah.
And more users of our stuff, more happy. Like this chart, are they aware? We converted them. Are they loyal? And that's really what we're trying to do at the end of the day as marketers.
Yeah, and it can do all these things, but again, it's tempting to do everything, to try to do everything, and actually focus back to focus to me in any marketing effort is important. It's choices, right? I love it. I think experiential is amazing as a consumer. I love interacting with cool brand stuff, uh, but it's hard. It's hard to stand out. It's it's hard work to pull it off. And I recommend that people think twice before just kind of winging it because you can't. And it's worth investing time in strategy, in creative planning, and in execution, and not just in execution. Sometimes the execution part takes over, and I think the planning and the creative ideation part is equally important. Um, but yeah, listen, I would highly recommend, especially for young folks entering the industry, working in experiential is wild, and it really it's exciting. You're in the center of culture. It's 24/7, but you build some crazy skills and you really understand customers. It's like working in restaurants, right? It's hard work, but that's where you learn how to deal with people. And this is a souped up version of that. So a lot of respect for those who work in experiential, for sure.
Now, are certain agencies more equipped to do this kind of work? I'm thinking, I mean, certainly the agency that you worked at, I know there's a location
Yeah,
here in Philadelphia. I knew a dude that, my friend who now works over at Vanguard.
a Vanguard.
Um, we met for lunch and we talked about, he was talking about the work they did for the Eagles.
Yeah,
Um, so are some agencies
yeah.
more skilled
There's
at this?
yeah. I mean, 160 over 90, where I used to work, is a great one. The what I would look at is specialist agencies in many ways because it is a specialism. There are some places that literally only do experiential. Um, there are others like 160 over 90 that are more full service with a
Mhm.
strong lean towards experiential as one of the ways they activate partnerships and things. Um, I would say that there are slightly different ways to look at it because if you go to a specialist, they tend to do just that, right? And it's very much the execution, sometimes the ideation as well, um, of events and things. So I would look at specialists. I would look at cultural marketing agencies like 160 or CAA or Wasserman or others like that play in the sports and entertainment space and then bring these things to life. And the wider circle is the big holding companies like Publicis or WPP or Omnicom. Those guys will have arms that do some of this stuff, but it's not a bigger part of their business, right? So I think you'll find a ton of small outfits that do really cool work. The luxury space, especially luxury, is very different to NFL, for example, obviously, but the type of people that execute in luxury, it's quite a niche. So it tends to be small, very, very good agencies that do only that. There's others. A friend of mine works at a place called Ultra V, and their expertise is merging AR and VR in experiential marketing. So there's so much out there right now. Um, I think it depends on what you're interested in terms of the types of things you want to do. You want to be on the ground building the thing. You want to be staffing the thing. You want to be ideating the thing. And some places do it all. Some places do one part of the puzzle. It's a huge microcosm actually.
It's exciting. To me, it's an exciting
There's a lot of cool stuff out
part
there.
of marketing. The let me think, is there any other let me ask you this. So if my
Yeah,
students have any
yeah.
questions, go ahead. Oh,
No, I was gonna say sorry. I lost you for a second. I would say the one thing I would add is that real life experiences, I hope, are never going to go away. So as an industry, it's a very rich one. It's a very exciting one. There's always stuff happening. So I think for people looking for a career could be interesting one because the merging of real life and technology is also super fascinating in this space. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there for sure.
and even in my career, and it's been a long time. I mean, for example, we had a sales meeting at a Hilton hotel in Chicago, and we were identified as a great prospect. And so they did this whole thing, flying everybody out to Los Angeles. We were at the Beverly Hilton. We went to, I had dinner with Wolfgang Puck when nobody knew who he was. We were
Yeah,
at the Dodgers Stadium, taking batting practice. We got, Mustangs that we drove, did a
yeah,
car race with.
yeah,
They got us fitted in in tuxedos for a special the father, the oldest Brooks was the MC. So I mean,
yeah.
without a doubt, I felt, wow, I should give more meetings to Hilton. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so this is going on as long as my career was around, and now it's gotten to the cool factor. The Game of Thrones, that last season, they were building these sets all over the country, the world. So this is now a message to marketing students to think outside of the box, as we like to say, is that cliche. And when you're working for a brand, you're working for a company, experiential is something you should definitely think about. And so I do want to thank my friend for coming in here and doing this, knowing that on Thursday you've been called out to a meeting. And so I do
Uh,
appreciate you sharing this advice and knowledge with my students.
my
So
pleasure. My
thank
pleasure.
you.
I wish I could have done it live, but any questions, you know where to find me.
Any questions? I will I'll compile those and send them out. I will let the students know, and just appreciate your support of my classroom. And this is like I say, the second time you've done this, and this will also be shared with my students. And again, I can't thank you enough. Your time is the most valuable thing you got, and you gave some to make my students better, and I do appreciate that,
I
my
love
friend.
it. I love being able to share. And they're lucky to have you, Tom, because what you're doing for them with all these guest speakers is pretty unique. So well done. Yeah. Anything
All
you
right,
need?
my brother. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All
And
right.
you have a good rest of your week. And I'm glad it was the Philadelphia Eagles who were there at the
Go
Super Bowl
Eagles.
and won it. So go birds, go birds. All right, man. Take care. Have a good rest of the week. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
All
Bye.
right. Bye bye.